Hey, everybody. Before this podcast starts, I just want to tell you something that we didn't know when we first started shooting it, but we do know now. Our old cam right there is a lot more rounded than our new one. Now, the reason for this is because of sound. It actually makes a big difference on the scope, but it means that our Fly-Brid conversion ran into an interference when using this new modern cam. So we worked really hard on a solution, and Gary found one. He modified a plate so that he could get in and trim a little off these saddles, and it works like a champ. In a separate video, I'll show you how to make a Fly-Brid, or in this case, a Flo-Pressional, using these parts and these kits. Let's join the podcast, already in progress.
Welcome to KahlerCast, episode 10. This time we're going to be talking about off-menu items. What is an off-menu item? Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but first, comments from last time. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing good. Let's get to it here.
Holocult says, thanks for the info on the 2500. I've been eyeing one up to slap in my Rare Explorer DiMarzio Boogie Bodies oddity build. Think I'm just going to snag a killer. Yes, that would definitely get a killer. Definitely avoid the 2500, but if it is a DiMarzio body, that'd be a Brass Factory thing, wouldn't you say, Gary?
Yeah, they could do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have those bridges. They will be for sale very, very soon. Neptoes says, you guys mentioned the pre-soldered strings being discontinued. This is likely because D'Addario introduced the NYXL strings with their fusion twist technology. If you look at the plain strings from an NYXL set, you can see there's some type of filler in there. Maybe not solder exactly, but something to keep the windings stable. Their tuning stability test video even uses a 2300. I have 3 Kahler 2300, 7300 guitars, and the NYXL strings keep stable tuning on all of them, no matter what I put them through. Lastly, their XS coated strings also advertise that they use the Fusion Twist technology, and SIT strings out of Akron, Ohio, has been dipping the ball end and windings in superglue for decades as their tuning stability trick. No one should need to solder windings in 2024. The NYXLs came out long after the Kahler D'Addario strings were discontinued. But I just happen to have a set, so you know what? I didn't know that. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm guessing you didn't know that either, huh, Gary?
I did not know that.
I did check out this YouTube link, and sure enough, it is a 2500 hooked up to, it looks like some kind of a pneumatic piston that is just beating the ever-living crap out of those strings, and the D'Addario NYXLs did seem to hold up a lot better.
Well, I got to tell you, D'Addario's a great company. If anybody's going to come up with something like that, they would.
I'd have to agree. I've been playing D'Addario's almost exclusively, except for on like 2 guitars where it's just an emotional decision to use something else since the 90s, and I love the D'Addarios. I really do.
Well, I have so much experience with them from a manufacturing point of view because they made our strings that we soldered, and they did all the tooling. They figured out how to do it, and this is a great company.
Just a little personal note before I ever came to Kahler, and I was doing the nonprofit, the Squishy Guitar Project, the D'Addario Foundation. When I was setting up my my dealer status with them, they actually said, we've got a foundation, and they were just incredibly helpful. Just a great company. I can't say enough good things about D'Addario.
Well, I'm really thankful. You know, we get this message. Thank you very much for sending it. That's very helpful.
John Gonzalez, 8224, says, the Washburn Wonderbar was third. I still have a guitar with one, and it's been in my stable since the early 80s. I've had several Floyd guitars, and the Washburn is my favorite. Okay, so this was from when I made the comment, Kahler came in second, but who came in third? Now, John, I mean, nothing but respect here, but in order for the Wonderbar to come in third, it would still need to be in production, and it is not.
Nope, it is not.
No, it is not. Hey, if it works for you, that's awesome. I have a guitar with a Wonderbar that I bought specifically just to have a guitar with a Wonderbar. If you look at the video where I'm unboxing it and talking about it, Oh, you know what? I'll just let that video do the talking.
Well, there was different versions of it as well.
There are actually 3 different versions. There's the Wonderbar, the Shift, and the Answer. They're all made in different factories by different people with different internal parts, but they all externally look the same. Tim Stromberg, 8754, says, "Hey guys, I appreciate the response to my question a few episodes back about the auto latch. I know you are working on an install video, but I am impatient and handy with a Dremel router, so I routed the back cavity of my LTD M1000 Koa a bit and fitted the Steeler Pro nicely. I have more than enough room to really go to town on the bar, but is definitely a little trial and error. I also realized this guitar has a slanted spring cavity, so I had to dice up some angled neck shims to get the indexer to sit at the right height and not interfere with the bridge, and also allow me to pull the bar back at extreme angles. I'll post a pic to Instagram eventually and tag Kahler. All of this is to say to everyone else waiting for the install video, the Steeler Pro with an auto latch is well worth the effort and is definitely the ultimate addition I could have added to my best playing guitar. Great news, you guys. The auto latch install video is out."
You had great guts to go do that.
Yeah.
Without seeing it. That's wonderful. We know all about that slanted area in there.
The auto latch install video, I do it on both the Spider and the Steeler. In the Steeler guitar, it does have the slanted cavity, and I show you how to deal with that. And also really give you a rundown of the 3 components that really make the auto latch work. In addition to that, you get the original written instructions when you purchase one of these things. They were entirely written by Dave Petchalot, right?
Yeah, they were. I made some contribution to it, but all I can say is it's very detailed. So that's the reason why you did a video of this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think that my video is complicated and involved, read the instructions. But I'll tell you, Dave Petchalot, just a brilliant guy. I mean, it must have been really an interesting thing to work with him.
No, well, I think we created some synergy.
At one time, you had both Petchalot and Story working for the same time.
Yeah, the 2 days.
The
My
Daves.
goodness, they had their own R&D department and did what they did. They got along so great. It was just wonderful to have them together, and we used to have morning meetings to decide, let's see, what are we going to try to invent today? But it was a real fun thing. He had some early encounters with Van Halen and a few other things.
Yeah, he actually built the little guitar that Van Halen wrote the song Little Guitars about. Scott C. says, "The Kahler colors remind me of parts from my BMX bike from the late 70s, early 80s. Gary's a good dude for giving 20% discount and doing the service of getting rid of the counterfeits." Question to Gary: did you ever see anything on a competitor's product that you thought was a great idea and it inspired you to improve something on your products? P.S. I like Salty Gary tossing the F-bombs, if you only knew.
Well, I know. We're seeing all kinds of things every day that are very kind of interesting. Old things we forgot about, new things, things that we can put together and make something else with. Well, sure, if you see something that works and you're not ripping somebody off, it's probably a pretty good idea to try to, hey, put it into your product if you can. And I think that's a realistic look at life. But what you don't want to do is counterfeit anything.
Just in case nobody knows or few people know, because I don't think we've talked about this, and we're going to have an episode where we talk almost exclusively about this. The Floyd Rose Pro. There have been 3 different versions of the Floyd Rose Pro. The current one is the Floyd Rose Pro 1000 that's made in Korea. That's the only Floyd Rose Pro that you can buy today. The one before that was the one made by Kahler in Germany, but the very first one was made by APM, which is Kahler.
That's right.
That's right. The very first Floyd Rose Pro was designed by you, Dave Petchalot, Floyd Rose, and what? Floyd Rose's engineer.
Yeah, I think so. I don't recall his name right now, but that was a wonderful experience. We got to deal very closely with Floyd and his engineer, as well as Petchalot and myself. Dave's story didn't have too much to do with that, but that was in the original design, the Floyd Rose Pro. So what they were trying to do is get the whale tail down lower.
Yes.
And so that it would, obviously everything would be lower and out of the way. And that's why you see that saddle arm little lever underneath and not coming out the back. I thought that worked out really well, but then Kramer had his difficulties, and that sort of ended that part of the era.
There are some really, really cool, very detailed drawings of the Floyd Rose Pro that we'll have to do something. I can't believe they're not framed. They look like art to me. It has a different spacing.
Yes, it does.
It's got a it's got a humbucker spacing, not the typical Floyd spacing.
And that's the way Floyd wanted it.
Those were supposed to be exclusively for Kramer, yes?
You know, I don't recall exactly, but I think that was the initial. That was the initial reason we were making it.
I just want to make a little comment here on two things. The first one, the Kahler colors remind me of the parts from the BMX bike. Oh my God, did I want a chrome with blue alloy, everything. Kuwahara KZ. One day I will have one of those things. And the 20% discount for getting the counterfeits out of here. Yeah, that you guys don't even know how. I mean, that's a big hit for us, but it's that important to get rid of the counterfeits.
Well, you know, we got a 55-gallon drum around here. We're trying to fill it up. So either they did or did not know, but it didn't make any difference to me at that time.
Yeah, and you know, if there was ever a good time for you to toss a salty F-bomb, it would be when you're talking about counterfeits.
This is coming through the wire, so I just prefer not to.
You're extremely good at self-censoring. I don't have that kind of discipline.
Well, you know, I'm from Nebraska, and Nebraska is a very Christian Judeo kind of location. Now, I've got to tell you, I don't make any boundaries there, except I have a lot of nephews and nieces and people like that in Nebraska, and they don't talk like that. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm from Seattle, where nobody cares about anything but themselves.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Jotes2384 says, great videos and really happy to see the boom in terms of the internet presence Kahler is getting now. Forgive me if this was answered in a previous video. I've tried to watch everything, but things like work and vacation have gotten in the way. But have you ever addressed changing the springs to heavy, using the heavy bar, etc., brings the Kahler closer to a Floyd Rose fulcrum bridge in terms of tuning stability, or if that helps mitigate the need to depress the bar after large bends? You know what? We haven't really gone into the whole changing out the springs, but it is true. The Kahler cam-based bridge is actually 3 bridges in one. They can be fixed very easily. All you do is just tighten down one little screw, and now it's a fixed bridge. You can leave it the way that it is with the regular springs, and it acts like a Kahler. You can put the heavy springs on, and it feels a lot more like a fulcrum.
And you can put the heavy bar in as well.
Absolutely. Now, this is really something that we're going to work on in the future. We're actually talking about building a double neck, and the only difference would be that one would have the heavy bar, the heavy springs, and the Kahler locking nut on one neck, and then on the other it would be just traditional with the string lock and things like that. But the pickups, switching, everything else would be the same, so that you could sit there, not trade guitars, and feel the difference. On top of that, I just want to say one last thing. Tuning stability. Well, if your tuning stability on your Kahler cam-based bridge is not good, check the nut. Particularly if you've got a string lock, because all of mine are just fine. But then again, you know, I make sure that I don't use any plastic nuts. They bind, plastic binds. And then the next thing is that, you know, you've got to make sure that those slots are cut properly. And if you have a graphite nut or some sort of self-lubricating thing, then leave that alone after you've cut the slot properly. But if it's not self-lubricating, if it's just like a straight-up bone nut or something like that, or brass, then you need to not only make sure that it's nice and smooth so it doesn't bind, but you need to lube it up as well. Music Nomad makes a great nut lube, but so do so many other people. Holocult again says, thanks for answering my questions and comments, Eddie and Gary. I look forward to this podcast every week. Would it be possible for Kahler to provide their own financing? Gary, your products are worth every penny. Is there a way to help the starving paycheck to paycheck musicians afford the Kahler Legend on their guitar?
Well, there's financing out there. You can go to PayPal.
Yes.
And you can do something there. At this point in time, I would say no, we don't offer that, because that's a whole nother section of a business that we'd have to put in, and that costs money. And then we'd have to charge more for that. And goodness, I would really like to be able to do that, but you just can't afford it.
Those people are absolutely ruthless too. If anybody out there, I'm positive, you know, and we'll probably get a comment or two about this, anybody that has gotten a Guitar Center credit card, an American Music credit card, a whatever credit card. The very first one that I ever got, believe it or not, was an American Music credit card.
Yeah.
It's like freaking 25% interest plus a 25% annual fee. It's designed to where you'll never pay it off. And so those people make it really easy. Hey, just add our financing. We'll take care of everything. And we won't do that.
You actually, on your end, it would be easier to finance it at the right price than it would be on our end.
Definitely look into your interest rates, and definitely don't get anything with an annual fee. That's just my own personal recommendation. But like I said, just hold tight, because we don't have very many. I think we got one more comment here.
Good.
And then we'll get right into how you can get into a Kahler. Very special deal. It's not going to last long. Jagger King 7020 says, I believe the Kahler Flyers were also as big of a reason for the bad taste as was the no licensing to foreign manufacturers Kahler Floyd saga. We have to admit the Flyer was a mistake and a good reason why people hate Kahler. A good reason. Let's get these guitars fixed. A real Kahler is amazing, but there are probably thousands of great guitars not being played due to Flyers. What in the world did the Flyer ever do to you, man? Is the Flyer as good as a 2300 or a 7300? No. No, it's not. But it's all primarily because of the saddles and the lack of a clutch. But that being said, the Flyer's just fine. Comparing a Flyer to like a Floyd Rose Special, there's no comparison.
I just like to say that, we're talking about time here.
Yes.
And this is the early 80s.
Yeah.
And at that time, using an intonation bolt and a spring and a saddle, which had 2 riser screws in it, was the way it was done. And then we come along with making tracks in a plate so that the little riser screws couldn't move left or right when bending and so forth. That was sort of the technology of the time at that time. And you would find that on fixed bridges as well as tremolo bridges. We were working on a lockdown saddle set, but it wasn't ready to go yet. Even in our first initial number one biggest order that we wrote, and that was the Gibson for 500 units. You'll notice that uses an intonation bolt in the spring, and of course, 2 riser screws and a little trax for them to run in. That was the most advanced at the day at that time. And Gibson liked it, and we went ahead with that. So we continued then to develop the lockdown saddle set, which we got today. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit later in this podcast. Yes, it's not as good a saddle set as today's lockdown. That's true. And we're going to try to begin to solve that today. You'll see.
And with that, I think that we can move on now to what today's podcast is all about. And that would be what we are going to call an off-menu item. Now, what does that mean? It means that we don't advertise it, but if you know that it exists, then we can certainly sell it to you. All you got to do is ask for it. And we're telling you right here and right now, and we're not going to make this hard for anybody. We're going to offer the last of our flyers. We've got just under 100 for $195 for a flyer. Now, there are a couple things, and I picked that last comment on purpose because the flyer, while the saddles and the cam are not quite up to par with what the 2300, 2200, 7300, 7200 are, they can easily be made to be every bit as good.
It's a constant, I guess we could say, evolution of what we're trying to accomplish. R&D is going on all the time. So it took time to invent, research, and develop all the things that we've researched and developed since we had the flyer. So what we're doing today here is to say, this is how you can improve your flyer, and we're trying to make it financially feasible for you to do that.
If we take a look at this random smattering of bridges sitting right here, you'll notice that there are 2 flyers, there's a bunch of parts, and then there is actually the Gibson bridge. Now, this Gibson bridge right here that actually says Gibson right there does, in fact, have the flyer saddles and the flyer fine tuners on there. So then we get to the flyer right here. Now, the flyer has the same saddles and the plate is different. Now, you did the plate different shaped to make sure that everybody knew this was a flyer, not 2300. Yeah, we sure did. Right?
But there's something that we did with that flyers I've done with every single plate I've ever made, is that those 2 back holes in the plate determine the intonation. And what I mean by that is you can take that flyer off and put a Kahler Pro on, and using the back 2 holes, it'll be at the same intonation, so that you don't have to do any more routing or anything like that. The footprint is the same, except for the front. And yes, I made it different because I wanted people to see that that plate was different, and not only the saddles, because we had in process the R&D on the new saddle set. And it's interchangeable with that plate in that the back 2 holes designate the intonation for that bridge. Now, the front 2 holes, just re-drill the front 2 holes on the new stuff, and it'll cover up everything regarding the flyer plate. If you were to replace the flyer with a 2300 or a 7300.
Other than the saddles themselves, the lack of clutch, that's the only other thing that really kind of, I don't want to say cripples the flyer, but it's a feature that it doesn't have. But the plate itself is made out of the exact same material that the modern 2300 and 7300. And
yeah, it's all made out of the same
stuff.
Substrates or metal, and it's Zamex 7, which is a good metal to use, and it flows well in an injection mold, and that's what we got to use on plate. if you're going to do a production, nobody can afford to mill a plate, let's say out of brass, because you just think about it. It's going to take a piece of brass a half an inch thick by 4 inches by, I don't remember, 3.5 inches, whatever. Right. And then you've got to mill it. Well, 3/4 of it is scrap.
These little tracks right here for the saddles, that won't interfere with the upgraded fork and rollers at all. So this right here is what I like to call a Fly-Brid. What that means is that it's a flyer plate with the flyer fine tuners on it. That's the only other thing that's flyer exclusive to this. But the rollers and the cam are exactly what you would get on a hybrid. If you want to just get into it and you want to just get a flyer, you can upgrade them if you want. We will sell you the flyer as well as all the parts for you to upgrade it yourself to a Fly-Brid, and that will be every bit as good as a hybrid with one exception, and that one exception is that it doesn't have the lock-off screw to make it a fixed bridge, because that was never put in the flyer plate.
Well, we didn't start to do that until I think it was early 90s.
Another thing, too, is those older Kahlers, those were all milled brass.
Well, in the beginning they were. For instance, that Gibson, you got that was all milled brass, and that was expensive to do. So we did do that, but then it also limited our market because you'd have to mark that up so high. Not only the machine time it takes to do it, but the amount it costs us on a substrate.
It's probably a good time to point out, though, that on everything that we have that's 7-string and above, that those are still 100% milled plates.
Yes, they are.
Which is a big part of the reason why they're so expensive, is because not only is the material more expensive, but also the amount of man hours that need to go into it, the amount of material that's wasted, blah, 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 blah.
All the special tooling it takes, all the cutters that have to be replaced, on and on and on. Yep.
So anyway, option number 1 is a flyer by itself, $195. Option number 2 is a flyer plus the hybrid parts for $295, which is less than a hybrid. You know, it's not a whole lot less, but you're getting an entire bridge plus an extra bar, an extra saddle set, and an extra cam. In addition to that, if you want to go with what I have been calling, for lack of a better word, a Flo-Pressional, I know, probably need to get a better name for that. That would be a flyer with professional parts. That bumps up once again another $100 to $395, but you get the full flyer, plus you get your choice of all the different professional cams and rollers. So that would be the 3 different cams, brass, steel, aluminum, 3 different rollers, brass, steel, and Teflon glass.
We've made it very simple in the grouping, and I know you'll do a good job of articulating exactly what that package is.
And I will show you guys exactly how to swap this out. It is very, very easy.
Yes, it is.
This is it. This is the end of the flyer. There's less than 100, and if you want to get just the flyer and then upgrade it later, as we were asked, can we make it easier for somebody to get into a Kahler? This is the easiest way we can do it.
Well, I think in our last email there, what he had to say, that he would prefer the lockdown saddle set, but it didn't exist at that time. So.
Yeah.
But now it does, and it's like a big erectile set here. All of our parts are interchangeable, not only on the guitar bridges, but also on the bass bridges, the same thing.
We're also going to make these 2 different kits, which is the cam, the saddles, and the bar, for both hybrid style, which would be brass, 3-hole brass cam and brass rollers. We'll make that available as a kit that will give you a price discount if you were to buy all that stuff at once, as well as Professional. And the important thing is that this isn't just for upgrading your flyer. This also would be for if you have an old plate and you need to replace everything on the plate. The old cams were 3 holes, and
Yep.
maybe
And some of them didn't have a clutch in them.
Yeah.
Because that clutch came along too as we were developing it. So for you folks that bought these tremolos in the 80s and even early 90s, you might take a look at these packages. I think that's in package 4 and 5, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And those packages will apply to the complete line, as you just stated.
Maybe you're left-handed and you've got a Kahler, and you're like, geez, I wish that I could use this, but it's for right-handed people, but I'm left-handed. Well, the Professional is ambidextrous. It'll do right or left. These are all ways for you to get in, save a little bit of money. We spent a real long time figuring out how we could shave the cost down as far as we possibly could while not giving them away to a point where we would go out of business.
I think the biggest thing with the fixed saddle, as in the Flyer, is that you have no adjustment to go over the poles of whatever pickup you're using.
Yes.
Whereas with the lockdown saddle set, the new one that we use now, you can adjust that left and right and run them directly over the humbuckers or whatever.
Yeah, humbucker, single coil, the pole spacing on a traditional humbucker before they started doing what they're calling either F-spaced or trembuckers, the old humbucker spacing was narrower than the single coil spacing.
That's why we've made this so adjustable, so the saddle set, so we could get it over the pickups properly. And not only that, you got your choice of steel or brass or composite. There's Teflon glass. And they do sound different. They do.
They really do. You're going to notice the biggest difference with the Teflon glass.
You will.
That accentuates the highest harmonic.
Well, and then you got the cams. You got a brass cam, a steel cam, and an aluminum cam. And believe it or not, they sound different. And we got pros that are playing different combinations because that's how they like it. I could say Kerry King plays with a brass cam and steel rollers.
Well, right behind you, we've got a Lita Ford Warlock, and it's steel rollers, steel cam.
Yep.
Right next to that is one of the kind of entry-level Kerry King BC Riches, and that's got an X-Trem, which is brass on brass, right? Yep. And then right next to that is a Hanneman, which is steel rollers, brass cam, and then, of course, the Kerry King, same steel rollers, brass cam, which that's my favorite combination, too.
I think it's important to point out that the Flyer, the Hybrid, and the Professional bridges all really started out with brass on brass, a brass cam and brass rollers. And what we learned, and we started out with a 2-hole cam, became a 3, and then it became a 5. And the reason that happened was we were listening to people in the field, just like we've seen here. You know, these ideas just don't come to us out of the blue. We get ideas from all different folks. Like I remember when we put the palm lever in, somebody said, well, what if I could just control this with my palm? Well, that's a great idea. So we did that. And I'm left-handed myself.
Yeah, it's funny. There are a lot of people who say, oh, well, you're completely ignoring the left-handed people. No. In fact, one day we will actually tell the story, because if it was not for Gary being left-handed, he'd probably be driving a tractor right now.
Yeah, I just might.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But because he's left-handed, that's the entire reason why these guitar bridges exist. It's such an interesting story. We're going to have to do that a different time, and that is going to be its own thing. Until next time, I've been Eddie Kernan.
And I'm Gary Kahler. And hey, thanks for sending us your communications, and we do appreciate your business.
See you next week.